what would be God's will, not your own. But when you take God out, you try to make justice your own endeavor, and look what we have. And now it becomes me versus you. It becomes my agenda versus your agenda. And I mean, I would say the world has been worse off because of that. I would say our country has now experienced more damage because of this one injustice. Now it's been multiplied.
Welcome back to another episode of PPK. Back with the boys. What's going on, boys?
How's it going?
What's good?
We are here to kind of get into some things as we record this. Man, so many crazy things going on in our world today. It's like we can't catch a break, but there are some. We would be remiss if we didn't kind of address those things. You know, our country as a whole is mourning and suffering, and we have a lot of people out there in the world, a lot of our listeners and viewers, family, friends who have broken hearts right now. And so our hearts and prayers go out to each and every one of you. And so we just wanted to kind of bring up the topic of really restoring the art of conversation. So Meeks, what is our inspiration for today's episode?
Yeah, so, as me and Keone have shared on a lot of episodes, we haven't really had a lot of people growing up that we necessarily agreed with on a lot of things. And that hasn't taken away from us having friends. Doesn't mean that we haven't made friends or we haven't been friends with people who we did disagree with and have a lot of different variations. And I think, unfortunately, one of the things that I'm noticing more and more as I grow older is that idea of being able to have that dialogue, even though you disagree, is just diminishing more and more each year. And, it's just it's unfortunate because the way we move together as a country, as a society, as a church, I don't know if it's so much about, within the greater society, it's not so much whether you disagree or not. It's going to happen for the rest of our lives. It's always going to happen. Mm-hmm. And there's always going to be bad people in every aspect. There's always going to be bad people in the church and beyond. And so I don't think we disagree on those kind of things. But the issue then becomes, well, then how can we continue forward and move together as a society, as a group, whoever it is, when even though you do disagree? And I think one of the issues is a lot of this group identity, which is extremely harmful. And at its root, it's just Marxist. And it's really this idea of you're shutting out one group. They're not allowed to say something because of their identity, while we are the now moral compass because of our identity. And it's never going to get you anywhere. Mm-hmm. because us three are Islander or Asian or whatever minority we are, doesn't make us above or below in any situation. We're human beings. So we're going to be able to just try to speak truth, not our truth. We're going to speak truth. There is no our truth because we're the Asian minority community. No, it's just truth. That's all there really is. And so we're just going to speak that no matter what. We're not given an advantage because you're from Guam. There's no Guamanian power, privilege, words that we get to use or language. I think that's just harmful. Mm-hmm. And instead of labeling people as you're a woman, you can't say this, or you're a man of this color and this race, so you're not allowed to talk about all this, how about we just have discussion? How about we just do that? And then maybe we can move forward, actually, because the whole unity that a lot of people talk about is unity within this side, but not that one. Mm-hmm. It's unity against this people. Mm-hmm. And it's just never going to get anywhere. It's
more like polarization, right? Yeah. That we're separated in camps. And I think the one thing that it does when you talk about group identity, I think one thing it does immediately cut off is dialogue. And look at how broken and wounded we are as a human race, right? That we have no ability to even argue in the very classical philosophical sense, right? Arguing, as you said, Meeks, is a real practical thing, right? Mom and I are talking about that in our marriage podcast, right? Is how do you argue within the context of a marriage and a family? In the classical sense, right? We're going to have disagreements, and we're going to have some really passionate disagreements. But can we do that still rooted in Christ, as we are Christians, right? We're Christian, Catholic Christians, but also upholding the dignity of that other person, right? And that's when the one thing about our faith that enables us to love that person even if we have a problem liking them, right? Which is a it's a difficult thing to do, but our faith enables us to do that. So one of the quotes, and I'll kick it over to you, Keone, if you have any thoughts initially. One of the quotes I did want to start off with, just to kind of level set, right, is that one we talked about as we prepared for this, is from Saint Bernadette, is our job is to inform, not to convince. We're not here to convince you of any specific way, thought, anything like that. What we're trying to do is inform you so that you can think for yourself, right? So that you can be empowered as a person to actually question, think about things, and all your experiences and how it leads up to that, and then make decisions based on that, rather than just emotions or being swayed or influenced by one specific entity or another.
Yeah, kind of going off what Meeks was saying, I think the biggest detriment to our society has been the elimination of dialogue. And it's just been, you see people now, like any debate becomes so charged and they're yelling at someone within 30 seconds. And I think the root of that has been the assumption that if you disagree with me, it must be because of some character flaw. That if I disagree with Miko, it must be because of something that's wrong with him as a human being, not because of a difference in opinion. So it's something, it now becomes a difference of essentially who he is instead of a difference of opinion. And that never goes anywhere. We think of Dr. John Gottman, who's one of the leading researchers in marriage and family. For any of you who are discerning marriage or are married, please look into Dr. John Gottman. But he talks about the 4 horsemen, which are basically the 4 different things to completely avoid, or else you're pretty much guaranteeing divorce. And one of those that comes to mind is the idea of contempt. And what contempt is basically, say a couple is arguing about something. They're no longer arguing about why, for example, let's say me and my fiance, she's pointing out that I haven't been doing the dishes. Let's say we're married, and she's like, you haven't been doing the dishes, what's going on? And say we get into an argument. And then I talk about, well, how lazy she is, and you never do this and that. And well, that's just because you're just being selfish. And so now it's a character flaw. Now she's lazy, now she's selfish, and we're completely removed from the initial conflict. And what was that? It was maybe a breach of trust. It was maybe I'm not following through. It was with the chore. But it immediately became you're lazy, you're selfish, and now it's a part of the person's character. And we see that everywhere in social media. We see it in political debates. We see it in any forum, in education. It's this underlying assumption based on the mob mentality, based on identity politics, that if you disagree with me, it's because you're othered, you're a different group member. It's because there's some sort of character flaw in you. And that's really impeded the pursuit of truth and unity, like true unity within groups and different people.
Yeah, not only do you limit somebody, well, here's reality. It doesn't matter what color or gender you are. It doesn't limit how you think. Just because you're a white male or a Mexican male doesn't mean you can only think a certain way. And like, yeah, so that's, I think, and unfortunately, I think who plays into that the most is the media. And, you know, as me and Keone were talking earlier, when you have an Instagram profile, you only get to see what I want you to see. And unfortunately, that's how it is for the media as well. And so we'd like to think that maybe Sean Hannity and Don Lemon are really there for us, but at the end of the day, they have a job to do just like everyone else does, and they have viewers that are a certain audience, and they're gonna do things according to that audience. And then everyone has an agenda. Fox has an agenda. CNN has an agenda. They all have things that they want to share. They want to push forward in order for them to not only get their views, get whatever power or gain they had out of it, because that's the reality of politics, unfortunately. It's not as moral as we'd like it to be. And that's why we have church. That's why we also have a separation between those, because when your church leaders are politicians and otherwise, it gets a little messy. And so, unfortunately, what we'd like to do also in opening up dialogue is saying that the media is not necessarily always who you'd like them to be. And unfortunately, they're manipulating a lot of us. And they do that by targeting emotional and this controversial and then putting you against each other. And they love doing that. And so we can see certain examples, and it isn't about left or right. This topic is mostly about showing how the media can manipulate certain audiences and how they can manipulate statistics and pictures and use certain things. So, for instance, a big controversial topic, especially within our community, especially the Catholic community, because it's a lot of Latinos, is deporting and that issue. And for those of you who don't know, Actually, statistically speaking, Obama has deported more illegals more than any other president in the history. And you wouldn't think that. Now, when you have seen Trump in this presidency, you show the family separation at borders, which I've said that was actually a thing under Obama's administration. Not the point. Doesn't matter if you agree with Obama or you agree with Trump. But the idea is that when it was under Obama, you didn't see that on the news. You didn't see those pictures. You didn't see people crying. You didn't have interviews of little 5-year-old girls crying they want their dad. You didn't get those. But however, he did deport the most. And so what the media likes to do is, well, that doesn't matter. The thing is, we want to paint this person a certain picture. We want to paint this person a certain picture. And because that's going to help us. CNN is going to be a little bit left-oriented. Fox is a little bit more right-oriented. So we're going to do things according to what fits it. If we like Trump, we're going to make sure Trump looks a little bit better than he would on CNN. CNN's going to make sure he looks as bad as possible. And this is not to say what direction is right or wrong, but the idea is that if you think that all your news and all your truth's coming from your phone, it's false. And you're going to get manipulated all day long because they're going to show pictures of you like just like that, and they're going to emotionally charge you. And then you're not going to be able to see, well, maybe actually this president did something worse than I thought he did, or this and that. They don't care about that. They just want to make sure you're on our side. And both will do that. There's no perfect news outlet. There never will be. There's no perfect show host. But the reality is that they'll do these things, and we had to start questioning why. Somehow, Jeffrey Epstein was on suicide watch and then somehow killed himself. And it was interesting because he was going to reveal some pretty deep information about Clintons and all those other things. We have to question why. We let that go, and we kind of go, huh? And then we let it sweep under the rug because the news outlet goes to the next thing, and they'll make sure you forget about that as well. And so we just all we're doing is saying, why are these things happening? How is it that someone on suicide watch commits suicide? Surveillance on them, 24 hours, you got a guard in front of the cell. How do these things happen? And why is it that when you look up certain things, they're not going to be there? How come, doesn't matter who it is, how come there's some things, there's a really famous video talking about pandemic, talking about the very controversial COVID. How is it that that's been taken away when you try to look it up? And you have to look up certain words. You got to look up this channel, and they're taken away. Why don't they want us to see certain things? Doesn't matter if it's right or wrong. Why don't they want us to see certain things? And guess who owns that? Google does. Netflix owns what you see. YouTube's going to own what you see. It's all private groups. They're all big corporations, the people we love to hate. And they're going to decide what we see. Just like on our Instagram profile, I decide what you get to see of me. And so it's not going to be no different with all these corporations. And just keeping that in mind, because those people are controlling, they're the gatekeepers. They control everything that we see. And we base that, and then we end up directing towards here. And it seems like a lot of times that's what they want. And they don't want you to see the big problems.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, something, kind of going off what Miko was saying. I don't know if any of the viewers heard of Plandemic, but it had some controversy. And it was she a biologist? I don't remember what her role was. But she basically goes out saying what COVID is, and it's very different than what the media is saying. Whether you agree with it or not, that's not really the point. But I tried to do some research on my own. I wanted to see what the facts were. And something that stood out to me is as I try to do this search, the first couple pages are all fact check, why this is wrong, debunked. And it's like, okay, why don't you just let me see it for what it is? Why is it that immediately that's all I see? Why this is wrong? This is outrageous. And to me, it sounds like that's maybe an agenda. Why can't we just see both sides? Just let me, like what you're saying, like the best professors ever. They give you the information and they let you decide, right? St. Bernadette, we want to inform, not convince, right? So just, you don't have to convince me. Just give me the information. And it seems like there's a level of censorship. We talked about it with Steven Crowder, right? I don't know if you guys follow Steven Crowder. He's the one that does all the Change My Minds that go viral. But he is no longer getting paid by YouTube. It's all based on his mug club because his stuff got censored. And now he's no longer making money. That's an issue because what did he do that really violated community guidelines, the ever so ambiguous community guidelines? Mm-hmm. It's time to question that. Yeah,
that's arbitrary and subjective.
Exactly. and I think it's time for people to actually take a step back and see, what are we seeing in the media? What are we seeing on YouTube, whatever it is, and why are we seeing it that way? And why is it when someone comes into the picture and says something very different than the mainstream media, it gets censored? like that. Like the 2 doctors from Bakersfield that said their experience and what they say, whether you agree with it or not, it's not the point. The point is, why is it that 2 doctors are sharing their experience that's very different than majority of doctors you'll see on the news? It gets shut out. You can't find it on YouTube. That's an issue. Because at the end of the day, the media, who we are supposed to trust, it's their job to present the news, and then the people are supposed to use critical thinking and come up with their own ideas. It's no longer that. It's, we're going to tell you what to think based on what we show you. And that's an issue. And I think we need to come back into dialogue in our country. We need to be able to have these discussions, but we also have to be able to be presented with the full story so that we can make decisions for ourselves.
Yeah, and I think it's we've lost. I'm going to go back and on the spiritual side of this for just a little bit, because I think that's to me the root problem of our world today is that we rooted God out, specifically in our country. Because we've talked about this in numerous episodes where this is the first time in our American history where we don't identify as a Christian country. Therefore, you rooted God out. And so for us as Christians, all the Christians out there believe that every person, every individual that you encounter, whether you like them or not, whether you identify with them or not, is created in the image and likeness of God. Therefore, their dignity, their value, their identity is flows forth from that, right? Media is telling us, right, what our identity and our value and our purpose is. Either you're going to be with this label or this group, and that's where your identity is. Like, you're taken away from my own personal lived experience. You don't know me, right? And so now we're pinning, we've gone Lord of the Flies on each other, right? So they came in, dropped us off into the island and told us what we need to think. And then now we're going after each other. And, talk about the broken human race. I mean, we already have the human condition of just our own just brokenness, right? Original sin is a real deal right now. You can know it's a real thing just by looking at our world. But, we've lost that ability to see each other as that. And so when you root God out, we're left to man's own reliance. And look at what's going on now. Like, we really, what started off as, or supposed to have started off as a promotion of justice has gone to a complete opposite, where we have people in our own communities, some of you more than others, violating one another. How does that honor anybody's memory, or how does that promote any justice? How does that move forward an agenda that everybody says they're for, like unity and getting rid of things like racism, which we all would agree is an absolute sin, right? And then pointing to everybody else about that rather than taking personal accountability for whatever failures there may be in your communities, in your own life. But we need to take it back to fundamentally rooted in the fact that we're made in the image and likeness of God. And you mentioned it, Keone, and then Miko, you're even talking about this, that we're giving information, and good teachers, good professors don't tell you what to think, they teach you how to think, right? So it moves us beyond, we're the only creatures that God created, my brothers and sisters out there, as rational beings. We have brains for a reason, that we can look at things and question, as Miko's been talking about, and say, well, that doesn't line up. So in other words, a perfect example of that, I'll use myself. If we're over here, we're in Priest, Prophet, King, we're talking Christ, this and that, and you see me the next day wilding out, doing something, smoking, drinking, partying it up, you're going to go, wait a minute, I seen that fool John on the PPK podcast talking about God this, God that, and I just saw him over there doing cake stands in the parking lot, right? You're going to be like, that dude's a hypocrite. Something's not right. He's portraying, he's filtering, he's presenting a specific look, feel, profile, agenda, identity, and that's not the real him. So then that's a good thing, right? You would question that because you see a dichotomy, you see a conflict, there's an incongruence with what's going on there. Well, why are we not doing that with what's being presented to us all day? Well, the truth is absolute and universal. There is no your version, my version, his version, their version. Truth is absolute and universal. Either this is a phone or it's not. You know what I mean? You don't get to call it an apple or a banana, right? This is either black or it isn't, right? And it's the principle of non-contradiction. And you had talked about, we're going back to Dr. Gottman's contempt. It's that logical fallacy of ad hominem, right? So then we may not like this person, so everything they say we don't like, we don't believe, rather than looking at the merits of their argument, right? So some people out there well-intentioned people right now are saying, I disagree with racism, police brutality. Wouldn't argue with that at all. 100%. Try those fools to the full extent of the law, right? Anybody who is caught doing racist act, we need to call for justice, 100%. And we've all experienced that to some degree, some greater than others, some lesser than others. But, right, how we go about promoting that and what that's tied to is a whole different thing. So if we disagree on that, right, and again, it's that for or against, or it's polarization. The media is going to say you either do it this way or you're not with us.
Mm-hmm.
What?
Two things can be true at the same time.
Yeah, two things can be true at the same time, right? And so that's what we're really trying to do, is to really help our listeners and our viewers out there just to go like, look, let's time out. First of all, y'all loved. You all matter. Everybody here is created in the image and likeness of God. Therefore, your dignity comes from God. Nobody gets to tell you otherwise. And you're loved, and we want to respect you as a beloved child of God. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. But man, can we talk about it? Can we put forth information to help each other think better? Because true love, we've talked about this, is willing the good of the other as other, and then doing something about it. Not just saying it and posting it and doing these little virtue signaling or these little posts that look nice because I'm in unity, but you're not really doing anything in your own heart or in your own community to affect any change in any world. More or less, whatever you put out there on social media. Yeah,
I'll just bring up one more example that doesn't really sit right with me, and then I'll kind of get into more of, dialogue and how do we go about this and change. But, as we discuss police brutality, and every time that a policeman abuses their power, it's good to show that. It's good to expose that. Just like I think every time that a priest is misusing the people around him and he's misguiding his sheep, that should be exposed 100%. Mm-hmm. Every time a priest is abusing people sexually or whatever it is, that should be exposed. I agree with that. Now, what doesn't sit right with me is that police have shot, you look at the numbers, it's going to be about 400 white, 200 black in the last few years. You got 100 Hispanic, and the list goes on and on. However, the only time that something's viral, the only time that we see CNN do something, or we see whatever the news outlet, MSNBC, whatever it is, it's always a white cop killing a black person. And to me, it just doesn't sit right with me, because out of the hundreds that they do, they always somehow want to choose those two, because they know that's going to separate us the most. Mm-hmm. That's what's going to emotionally charge us the most. And that's what I don't like, because I like to call people out. I like that those people need to see, hell yeah, police abuse their power. We've had refs all the time thinking that they're tough, right? Oh, you need to watch yourself, 12. You need to watch yourself. Okay, all right, dude. Okay, all right. Here we go. Yeah, I got it. Okay, at ease. And we see that all the time. However, it just doesn't sit right with me that the media gets to choose who we're making viral today. I want to make that case viral. Mm-hmm. Why do they choose that? That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying it's because this reason or that reason. I just don't get why they choose that one every single time. That's the only ones that make it. Mm-hmm. I haven't seen a white guy get killed by cops yet, mm-hmm. but I know it happens. Mm-hmm. And all I'm saying is that these people seem like sometimes they want to deliberately divide us. And then that goes, because they're playing that role into, well, then two truths can't be at the same, there's no way it could be both true at the same time. So either you're here or you're there. Mm-hmm. And if we're going to pretend like a world is black and white, I mean, have you had your 8th birthday yet? Everything's gray. Everything's complex. Nothing ever is black and white. Mm-hmm. Ever. There's no situation in the history of mankind that's just, it's either this or that. That's not how it happens. Mm-hmm. The situation's complex. So the point is that you really have to start, especially as Catholics, questioning what's being brought to us and then what we're doing with that information. Because no matter what we're doing, no matter what we think we're doing, we're always sending a message, and it's either going to be right or wrong. That's the only time things are black and white, is when you make it, you're either going up or down, that kind of idea. And so, like we're saying, this is not about saying which one's right and wrong. It's just that these are issues that I'm seeing within the media. They're not consistent. I think we can all agree on that. They've never been consistent for any side. Doesn't matter what side you're on. They're not consistent for you, and especially we're Catholics. So if you look at The View, right, with Whoopi Goldberg, classic. Do you think that they ever put someone on there that says, you know what, I was going to have an abortion, I walked out, and this is the best decision I ever made? Do they have those girls on there? I don't think so. Mm-hmm. So they're not fairly representing, no matter what side you are, the The media is not going to, they're going to show what they want to show.
Mhm.
And then to go forward with that, okay, well then how do we attack that? I think it's important, like we're talking about, not to have ad hominem, but you don't want to lose a soul and win the argument. That's not going to do anything. That's not our point. We
Mhm.
want to see people where they're at. We want to see, understand, hey, I understand you're hurt. I understand this rubs you the wrong way. Let's look at it together, holistically, and who's trying to do this? What is the point of it? Why were we showing this exactly? Because what they're doing is, it's interesting that they only show this certain type, and then we become at each other. But what if they didn't, and then we said, wait a second, why aren't you doing that? And then now, CNN or Fox and all, whoa, hey, easy guys, what's happening? But it's so much easier when we're here, when we're at each other's necks. Mm-hmm. And that's what we're trying to get away from, is saying, maybe we should start questioning them. These guys who are in control of everything that we're saying, maybe we should question them a little bit. And meet people where they're at, and not attack their character, and hear the person first.
Yeah.
And understand that every opinion that my dad has is because he's had experience behind that. And he's been formed a certain way that's different than what I've been formed in. So then we got to be, okay, where are we at? Why are we saying what we need to say? Okay, that's where we go. Mm-hmm. And understand that I'm not going to take what my dad, that little piece of what my dad said that I didn't like, and I'm going to make that his entire philosophy. Well, then you're saying this. That doesn't get anywhere. Mm-hmm. Nor does, if my dad brought up somebody, but he's made a couple mistakes in his life, God forbid, well, then he also said this too. You agree with that? No. Well, did I say that? No, I just said he did this, right? And so we keep, this is so many fallacies that we commit all the time, and it's never going to get us anywhere, ever. Because as soon as I say something, either I've made a mistake in my life, so that means that I'm not validated in that, or if I bring up someone else, he's made a mistake in his life, dang it, so now he's not valid in his point anymore. Mm-hmm. And it's just this circle that we're never going to get around until we can sit and actually have dialogue and not see all these names we want to attack on them, and just see the person.
Mm-hmm. When especially kind of like as we're recording this, we're like, the world is going crazy right now. Riots, protests, like you said, Meeks, our country is emotionally charged right now, and partially rightly so, right? I mean, there's an injustice that happened, right? I was talking to Father Peter, who's been our confessor and growing to be a really good mentor to us as a family, and he was talking about, you know, what JP2 said, and he said, you know, in the face of injustice, the first thing you should do is take it to Jesus first. And we think of how the country has abandoned its Christian roots. When you're taking Jesus, when you're taking God out, who do you go to first? Yourself. Mm-hmm. Now it's upon my hands. I'm going to make justice right. And that more often than not leads to more injustice because we're sinful. And, you know, I was just thinking about, you know, we got rid of God, and now we're not able to take it to God and say, hey, what's going on, God? Like, I'm hurt. If you're feeling hurt by this, or you're emotionally charged, like, I'm hurt. Guide me in this so that justice is served, but also the dignity of every human person's maintained, including my own, right? That's gone. And we think of how the brain operates. There's a reason why you have your executive functioning, and then why your emotion center in your brain is not in your executive functioning, because they operate differently. Mm-hmm. And often they operate like a teeter-totter. Right? Because, you know, back in the day when you're a caveman, you're hunting, gathering, and there's animals, it's fight or flight. You didn't have time to plan what you're going to eat later, or what, you know, you had to run and go, right? And so that's the emotion center. That's where we're operating right now. And we're not thinking logically and rationally, because we're driven off emotion. And that's where it's the most divisive, because you're not thinking this or that, right from wrong. What is the best option? You're thinking fight, flight, or freeze, essentially. Mm-hmm. And that's where, when Father Peter said, take it to Jesus first, now you're making a personal decision to calm yourself down, to think about it rationally, and then decide what would be God's will, not your own. But when you take God out, you try to make justice your own endeavor, and look what we have. And now it becomes me versus you. It becomes my agenda versus your agenda. And I mean, I would say the world has been worse off because of that. I would say our country has now experienced more damage because of this one injustice. Now it's been multiplied. And I think that's an issue.
Well, that's why I think groupthink and identity politics thrives in that where God is out. because now somebody else is dictating. You just took God out and became God, right? So if that's the government doing that, if that's the media, if that's one group who's the mob mentality telling you, they just replace who God really is. So that's what I'm saying is we've to your point, Kenny, rooted God out, and now we've lost our identity, and now we're grasping at trying to figure that out. One thing I did want to say, as we're talking about this, I want to make sure that we're very clear is that we don't dismiss or trivialize anybody's experience of, in this case, if it's racism, right, or police brutality. I was just sharing with you some run-ins I had as a youngin, being a knucklehead with police, right, and being able to have that dialogue. So I had a great conversation with a family member earlier today, an emotional one. Had emotional text with a brother of mine yesterday who we may not even see necessarily eye to eye on things, but hey, I'm praying for you and I love you, right? And so we don't ever want to dismiss or trivialize that, but what we're trying to do is say, outside of your personal lived experience, pull your head up from the tears, from the emotion, and look around and question things and ask yourself, where is that coming from? Because one of my quick triggers is injustice. I've been through so much crap in my life. This hits a wound like no other, but I don't like being manipulated and I don't like being used. We can all agree to that, right? Nobody likes being played. Nobody likes being used. Nobody likes being a pawn in somebody's chess game. And that's all we're trying to say is don't be, right? Don't be. That you are valued, you matter. Your experience matters, your emotion matters, even your fight for justice matters, right? And for us as Catholics, we're saying, 100%. We want truth, we want justice, we want love to come. We want to breathe life into this world, but look at our world right now, and we're trying to do that without God. So, like Keone said, it's like this is why we're suffering, is because we've become a godless nation, and now we're feeling the effects of that. We're feeling the effects of that. Yeah. Any parting words, Meeks, on this one?
I guess I'll shout out my sophomore year AP Euro teacher when he's telling us, if you take anything away from this class, which is literally the only thing I took away from his class, so it was good. He was like, it's the last day of school. He was like, start to question the things around you. I think I said this in the first episode, and I'm not sure where his intent was. And even at the time, I was like, I don't know about this. I already know the school system's full of people who aren't very religious and not necessarily super kind to the people that we are, I guess, in a certain sense. And I don't know, maybe he's onto something there. But I think the idea is, that we need to start questioning things around us a little bit more. And I don't know if it's necessarily directed at each other, but more at the bigger picture, and people with a lot more power than we do.
Something that I wanted to just kind of leave everyone with is, when I'm teaching or working with my kids in session for therapy, we talk about the idea of primary and secondary emotions, and how anger is predominantly a secondary emotion and is often hiding or guarding a primary emotion, which is maybe more often than not some sort of fear, sadness, maybe stress. And the more I teach it, the more I look internally. And when I'm really upset, if I'm find myself angry, I have been able to get a lot better. Obviously, I have a long way to go, but I've been able to kind of sit with that and be like, why am I actually angry right now? And usually, if you are actually honest with yourself and you're reflective, the answer will be there. I'm stressed out because of something. I'm scared, or I was hurt by what happened, or what someone said to me. And we often, especially men, I think, we cover it up with anger, because it's more socially acceptable. So when I think about what's going on today, and, if you're feeling super angry right now, if you're feeling, charged, emotionally charged, like a lot of people are feeling, take a step back and really come to terms with what is that anger really trying to protect or guard, and then really attack the root of it. And because I think that's a big step in us actually coming to a solution, is finding the root of it, and not kind of these outward motions and actions that aren't really hitting the foundation.
You're curing the disease, not treating symptoms. Yeah, that's great. And I would say just my parting word for you all is, again, just pulling it back to, we're in some very unfortunate times, and as a human race, we need to pull together. We need to be very prayerful. We need to fast for one another. But as people who do follow us and follow me, I've been saying, be the change you want to see, right? So you can't control what the media does, what certain groups do, but you can't control what you do. Just be smart about that, right? Be kind, be firm in truth, be grounded in truth. And for us, we're saying, that truth is a person. So being rooted in Christ, and stand for that, but stand for truth and do so in love. And just remember that we're just putting that on out there so that we can help our fellow brothers and sisters out there. Just take a step back, take a breather, bring some healing, definitely bring some unity, but also empower you to just kind of think for yourself. Meeks.
Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.
So we thank you all for joining us on what was a very heavy topic. And just know that for all of us here in our family and us three, that we'll be praying for you and we'll continue to pray for you. And we look forward to joining you on the next episode of PPK. So until then, get holy or die trying.